Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I'm joined as always by Sam, and we got a lot to get to today. The NASCAR race at Atlanta, some F1 livery reveals, and some other stuff as well. But we'll start with the NASCAR race at Atlanta, where Christopher Bell gets the win in overtime as a wreck on the backstretch brought out a yellow in turn 3 when Bell was leading at the time. Obviously, the yellow flag is the big takeaway, the big talking point from the weekend and from the race. Just as last week, we had praised NASCAR for letting them run to the line. This time, they elect to go the other way and throw the caution in very similar circumstances. Very interesting decision by NASCAR, one that has been talked about a lot by the fans the past couple days.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think, the situation, I think we see a lot of the drivers and fans alike asking for some sort of consistency. But I think it's a very tough thing to find consistency. And just, we talked about this last week at Daytona with the nature of these accidents. And, some are more severe than others. And they, depending on where they occur on the track, it's really tough to find a solution to this. But I know that we're going to dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, I know it's different every time, and there's always going to be different circumstances surrounding the situation, and how the severity of the crash, and if there's any type of urgent situation that needs to be taken care of. Obviously, the yellow will come out, but it's just I've heard some people say that it should be treated the same as any other lap, and throwing the yellow there. And I'm fine with that if we, make it to where we do finish under green, that we don't just have the last lap finish under yellow, that we, rack them back up and go out there again. I don't think anyone likes seeing these, finishes under yellow. I don't think NASCAR even likes seeing it. I know the point of it is so that we don't have like unlimited overtimes and the race goes on forever. But I think guys and drivers, fans, teams would rather have that and have the race end in a natural way than ending under yellow, where the start finish line is just wherever it happens to be and not the actual finish of the race.
Yeah, and it's a complicated situation because a lot of these accidents, if they occur early in the lap, closer to the start-finish line, then you can't really run them back around and finish the race, because that leaves open some dangerous possibilities if everybody's crashing on the line at once and there's cars in the infield or on track or whatnot. That could be pretty dangerous. But also, then you reach a certain point in the lap where it's like you want to finish this no matter what. So it's almost like they're, if they're going to do it, there would be some sort of zone on the track, like from this area on, then, we finish the race. But it's really a tough situation. I don't really know if there's a perfect answer. I think they should be more lenient with cautions on the last lap than they are the rest of the race. Just in general, because I feel like sometimes NASCAR is too strict with cautions anyways, at least depending on the track. But I like the idea that, that we're just going to have to play this differently depending on what happens. And unfortunately, I'm not really sure there's a good answer here.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about the last lap is different than any other lap in terms of a yellow flag or something with safety, because the whole point of a yellow flag or a red flag or whatever, some stop for safety, is that we're stopping the cars on track from coming back and having anybody come through the situation that's farther behind and make the wreck worse, and so that we can get to these guys quicker. But the last lap is different because you don't have that opportunity for guys to really come back around. They've pretty much all slowed down by then, and are on their cool down lap. Whereas if it's a green flag, they come back around. They can make the accident worse, which makes sense, and that's why we do the yellow flag in that situation. That's why I think it's different, because at the end of a race, it's gonna be it's just a different situation with guys coming back around and finishing the race. So I think that It is a little bit different for a yellow flag on the last lap, but also I'm fine with them still throwing the yellow for safety reasons. I just think that if we're going to do that, we need to not finish the race under a yellow flag situation and have it always be where whoever crosses the actual finish line first is the winner.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, if we end up with a line on track, that's going to affect the racing too. That, you almost have two different finish lines depending on the track, especially at tracks like Daytona and Atlanta where accidents are a lot more possible. I don't know. Just for me personally, like I said, I like them to be a little bit more lenient, but sometimes safety has to come first, and I totally get that too. So I think if they did come up with some sort of line, I guess it could work, but I'm not fully sold on the idea yet.
Yeah, I don't think I would rather just see them just do it again than have some sort of line on track. Like you mentioned, that creates a whole other opportunity of racing to that line, and then what if it's between some line in like turn 3 and the start finish line? Who do you go back to that first line to say that's where the finish is, or do you do it from the yellow between that? Like, it's just there's too many different outcomes, and it's just too. It's just not very consistent, and that's what we're asking for really from in the first place with this. Is it's fine if they want to throw the yellow if that's how they did it last week and that's how they always do it, but it seems like every week it's different. I would like to just see them do it, have one set of rules, and they stick to that no matter what the situation is. If they're going to throw a yellow earlier in the race for Ryan Blaney spinning on the apron by himself, then they should also throw the yellow here, definitely, because it was a much bigger wreck. But, we don't want to see the race finish that way. We want to see it finish under green, or at least that's how I would like to see it. I feel like that's how a lot of fans would like to see it as well. So if they're going to throw a yellow in that situation, I'm fine with it, but it needs to finish under green, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you that the consistency would be ideal. I think that the kind of incident that you described there with Ryan Blaney, I think that's the kind of incident that I would like to see NASCAR throw the yellow less on, just if it's one car that's sort of out of the way, and it's not some major pileup, especially on a track as big as Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice to see them kind of let that play a little bit more. There's just so many cautions in these races sometimes. The first two stages I think actually were mostly pretty clean in this race. There were one or two minor incidents, but it wasn't too bad. But then, we saw some more accidents towards the end, as you're always going to see. But then the race just keeps dragging on, and it's sort of like watching the end of a basketball game with all the free throws, and you feel like you're almost not even watching the race or the game anymore. It just kind of becomes something else, and it's I'd like to see them finish under green as much as possible, but unfortunately, every now and then, that's just not always going to be what's going to happen.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about them not wanting it to drag on like the end of a basketball game or some other situation like that, like we have with some of these races. Even, if they don't get to that white flag and we see, 2 or 3 overtime finishes, it can drag on and it can get, kind of tiring to an extent, but I would much rather see the guys just play it out to the end rather than a finish like this, because we could have had a great finish there with Christopher Bell, Carson Hocevar, and Kyle Larson there right at the end. They were 3 wide coming to the finish. I would have loved to have seen that. Obviously, the yellow flag and the safety comes first. But if we, decide to go again and do another overtime, we might get another finish like that. So I'd rather see a natural ending to a race than one that ends under yellow every day of the week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat, and I think most fans are too.
Yeah, well, despite the end of that race not being what we wanted to see, I thought the actual racing it during the entirety of Atlanta was excellent. I know a lot of people, myself included, blame the package itself, the super speedway package, for not great racing at Daytona and Talladega sometimes. Yet that same super speedway package is effective here at Atlanta. I think, obviously the tracks are slightly different. Atlanta, 1.5 miles, Daytona, Talladega, 2.5 miles. I think, it's just weird that for some reason at Atlanta it works well, and at Daytona and Talladega it doesn't. But it does prove to an extent, I guess, that this package can work given the right circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, not having the packs as tight as they are in Daytona, I think it definitely allows for more natural feel to the racing. And we still got to see a lot of great moves, and there's a lot of up and down throughout the race, guys moving throughout the field. So I like the balance at Atlanta between it's definitely a drafting track, at least a lot more so than most other tracks on the calendar. But, we see Daytona and Talladega, these guys are on each other's rears for the entire race, and they're sort of stuck in this pack racing, whereas Atlanta, there's a lot of that, but there's also a lot more room for these guys to get out and move around, and they're not so stuck in this 2 wide or 3 wide packs for the entire race. I think that's a nice balance between sort of close racing but not pack racing like we see at those tracks, and I think at least is some of the best racing we see all year.
Yeah, Atlanta is now the center of what I think super speedway style racing should be in NASCAR. It's perfect in every way, in my opinion. You can push a guy like you can at Daytona, but you can also make runs around him. You can go high, go low. You can use pretty much every lane. There is some handling that comes into play. You have to set up your car in the right way to where you can handle better than the guys around you. That's going to help you. Tires does make a little bit of a difference, not a ton, but some sort of a difference. So I think it just has everything, and I'm really excited and glad that Atlanta made this change. I know it was one that was a little bit worrying whenever they did it, because Atlanta had been the same way for so long, and a lot of people didn't want another super speedway track. But this racing is a little bit different than what we see at Daytona and Talladega now. I think it's what Daytona and Talladega want to go into and what they want to be, and see that racing there. And, I hope that there's some way we can do that with lessening the drag on these cars, or, opening up the horsepower, or just doing something different at Daytona and Talladega that can make it more like Atlanta, because Atlanta is one of my top 5 favorite tracks now to look forward to and to watch in NASCAR.
Yeah, and I mean, I like your ideas on making it more like Atlanta, making Daytona and Talladega more like Atlanta, because we saw that at Daytona, watching the racing all week there. We saw these guys, the moment they get out of the pack, they shoot straight to the back of the field.
Yeah.
It's almost inevitable that, at some point that's going to happen to you. And I think, Atlanta's a nice mix of, if you stay out of the draft for too long, it can certainly hurt you. But, you've still got time to go around guys, to make moves, to set up new lanes and whatnot, and it's not going to cost you 5-10 positions even more. I really do love this track. I think, there's been some speculation that more tracks are going to try and replicate this, what Atlanta's done. And, I'm a little bit cautious of that, just because, I don't want every 1.5 miles sort of track to try and turn into this. And then, we end up with, who knows, maybe next time they change the package, maybe the racing's not as good here or whatnot. And we just end up with too many tracks that are the same. But I really like Atlanta's uniqueness on the schedule right now as a super speedway, but not the same as the others. And, you're pretty much always guaranteed a fantastic finish. Even with the finish under yellow this time, we still got to see some great racing at the end.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, is that at Daytona and Talladega, you get out of line and you're gone no matter what. Whereas at Atlanta, it's the decision that makes the difference of trying to go for that move. Do you think you have enough momentum to overtake the car in front of you? At Daytona and Talladega, you have no shot to do that. Whereas here, you have a chance. It's just making the right decision. If you make the wrong decision, you get sent to the back. If you make the right decision, you can make that move and make it work. I think that's the big difference, and that's what I think makes Atlanta so great right now is, the last 40 laps are some of the best racing I think we see, in NASCAR all season at Atlanta is that everyone's full out 100%. You don't see the fuel saving as much or anything like that. Obviously, you still can. It's kind of the way that the cautions fell this week. But regardless of that, I just think it's full out to the end. Everyone's going 100%, making all the moves that they can try and make. And I think that this car and track combo is what allows them to do that. So I give NASCAR a lot of props in that aspect of creating something like this. Like you said, though, on the other hand, I don't want to see a Texas or somewhere else try and replicate this because I think it's very unique to Atlanta. I'd rather see Daytona and Talladega try and replicate this with their super speedway designs than a Texas or someone try and replicate this design, because I think we have 6 super speedway races a year. I think is enough. If we could get the other 2 tracks to be as good as this one, I think that would be huge.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't change too much about Daytona or Talladega as the speedways, but I certainly would be open to changing the way we race there, changing some packages and whatnot to try and make a more unique package for those 2 tracks and allow them to race more like Atlanta does. That would certainly be great. I think one thing I really like about Atlanta too right now is, you talked about the race in the last 40 laps, how great it is. I think this is a track that really encourages drivers to take risks in the same way that Daytona or Talladega does, but I think it's even more fun to watch here. I mean, we saw guys like Daniel Suarez win here, and that makes their season. This time we saw Hocevar going for the win at the end, which would have made his season, clinched him a playoff spot. We saw Ricky Stenhouse in the top 5 and John Hunter Nemechek up there as well, ending up in the top 10. I mean, there's a lot of great drivers at the top too, so it's not like, all the guys at the bottom are at the top and, you're not rewarding the top drivers or whatever, but you're going to give guys, that normally wouldn't have the chance, maybe a shot to win a race, and that's going to encourage some really, hopefully not dangerous driving, but definitely risky and, which can be a lot of fun for the fans.
Yeah, I think it's a very great mix, and as well, a guy like Josh Berry up there for a lot of the day.
Yeah.
He had a great chance to win in a great car. It seems like there is a gap of the top teams and the bottom teams still at Atlanta, but that gap is a little bit lessened, not to the extent that it is at Daytona and Talladega. It's a bit of a wider gap than there, but then the other tracks on the schedule, it is a bit of a narrower gap. And I think that's a great thing because it does, give other guys a chance to make a move and to make their season, but also it rewards guys who have a great car and are, on it that day.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I mean, realistically, the best teams should have the best chance to win. If they've got the best equipment and the best drivers and whatnot, then they should have the best chance to win. But I do like, a little bit of a narrowing of the curve there, flattening of the curve, I guess, and, giving these, smaller teams maybe a chance if they play all their cards right and they have a perfect day. They've got as good of a chance as anyone of putting the car in victory lane. I think Daytona and Talladega, we see sometimes, see guys come out of nowhere and end up in victory lane, and I think that can make for a great story. But I like that it takes maybe a little more a skill, I guess, for lack of a better term, to put it in victory lane in Atlanta while still being feasible for those teams.
Yeah, well, moving on here to Fox coverage once again, I wanted to touch on this because there was a lot of complaints on online about the amount of commercials this week at Atlanta. And I saw multiple errors on the broadcast as well of, they were talking about one thing and showing another. You got that with the Toyota cutaway car early on, Larry Mack talking about it and them showing something completely different on screen. And then also on the pit crew segment as well, it was a similar situation. The commercials obviously still being an issue. I'm still going to give them props for doing more side-by-sides instead of full commercial breaks because I think it's great that you can still see some of the racing. But the commercial load is just too much regardless. And maybe this was just me, but I feel like it was either in side by side or full commercials. They showed or didn't show, I guess, a lot of the pit stops this week. I feel like we're either through side by side or on full commercial breaks. They make a big deal about pit stops every week, and they are a big deal. And then when you just don't show it, it's just kind of, it just lessens what you're trying to sell us on the pit stops. And I'd like to see it as well, because you have guys come in, maybe there's a big mistake for one of the cars. I know Denny Hamlin, I think, ran through too many and had to go to the back. We didn't really get to see that on the broadcast. They had to mention it to us later before they restarted. So it's just stuff like that I feel like Fox just is continually getting wrong and messing up. And I think the other thing too is, to me, it feels a bit more childish and cartoonish than other racing broadcasts. You watch an F1 or an IndyCar, or this weekend it was the Australian Supercars opening. I was watching that as well. And all of those broadcasts are just way more to the point, way more serious about the product that they're showing. They don't show random people in the stands all the time, or they don't show, you don't have cartoon caricatures of the drivers. You don't have, Clint yelling in your ear the whole time. I just think that the broadcasts over there are just way more, not even over there, because IndyCar American mostly, but they're a lot more serious than they are in NASCAR. And I just wish that they would take it a bit more seriously, because to a lot of people, it is a very serious thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat, with being disappointed on the broadcast. I feel like there was definitely, I mean, there is almost every week, but there was a lot of commercials this week, especially stage 1 and stage 2, which I get a little bit in that, you want to stack those commercials, I guess, earlier in the race rather than later, getting one with 10 laps to go or something. But still, it definitely felt overboard. I'll give them a little bit of credit for doing more side by side, at least when cars are on the track. Mm-hmm. So, you're not totally missing live racing. But, I agree we're definitely missing some pit stops. And, that is a pivotal a part of the race and something they always talk about. I think, too, I noticed in the booth this week, I think Harvick can be a little bit bland on the call sometimes, but I do think he gives really good insight a lot of the time. And there's nothing wrong with that, having a little bit more of a straight man, as long as they give really good insight, which I think he does. But then, you have Boyer, who, maybe occasionally has some moments, but also has, a lot more moments that, I'm not as into. And I don't know. There's just something a little bit off about the dynamic there. It sort of feels like they have kind of the funny guy and the straight guy, but it doesn't always, work out, at least in my opinion. We talked last week about Boyer shouting over Mike Joy during the finish of the race and everything. And there's just something off there. I think Mike Joy is still good too, but he just doesn't really seem to have the same energy for it, that he used to. Like, he's still good calling the race throughout the race, but when you get to that final couple laps, you really want to hear the energy from the booth, and it just doesn't feel like he has that same level of energy anymore. So it's just kind of there's a lot of moving parts there, and a lot of parts that I think are kind of struggling right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about Mike Joy, but I think if you have other guys in the booth around him that are better, it can still it can cloud that ending of the race to where I don't feel like it's as bad of a broadcast. I love what you said about Harvick. I think he can be a little bland sometimes, but I think he is great at giving, what these guys in the car are feeling and talking about the actual strategy of the race and the cars and the drivers and all of that. I think whenever they try and get him to step out of that role and get into more of like a funny guy thing with Clint is where it gets, kind of off to me with Harvick. But if they had him stick to that role, I think it would be a lot better for Harvick. I think he's gotten better over time with the broadcasting as well, being up in the booth. So I'm pretty good with Harvick. I think, a little more energy could be fine. But I think he gives enough insight to where it's okay and we can get past that. I think just the dynamic in that booth all comes down to Clint and trying to find someone else that could, bring the best out of Joy and Harvick as well. I think would be a wise move for Fox.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they continue with NASCAR, that they, tried to make some changes there, and obviously, as far as Mike Joy goes, I think, like I said, I still think he's excellent, and I still, I wouldn't replace him, as long as he wants to be there, pretty much, I'm okay with him being there. It's just more of a, like you said, I felt like there was a lot of, to Clint's credit, I guess, there was a lot of energy from Clint at some of the end of the races, but he's not the one, or shouldn't be the one, making those calls down the stretch. Exactly. So, yeah, there's just a dynamic that's off there, and, it still feels like, all these guys have been doing this for a couple of years now. There's not really, I get it for the first couple broadcasts. We saw that with Tom Brady in the NFL, there was a couple times in his first broadcast where he, didn't really know when to speak and whatnot, and was kind of off with that. And that's fine at the beginning, but, these guys have been doing this, not only doing this, but doing this together for a while now, and it still feels like the dynamic's not quite there.
Yeah, I agree. I just, in the end, I just wish NASCAR or Fox would take it a bit more seriously, and it's a product that they've had for so long and used to be so good on Fox, and it's just kind of a shame what's come of that, and now how we look at Fox, broadcasting NASCAR compared to what it used to be, because I feel like they used to be the pinnacle, and now I don't know who would be the pinnacle. I don't know if it's NBC. I don't think that they're, miles ahead. I think they're better, but not by that much. So I just wish Fox would kind of get back to those old ways. And I know a lot of that was the booth that they used to have, and it's hard to replace guys, like the guys that they had. But I just wish that they would be able to find some way to take it a little bit more seriously, at least.
Yeah, and that's really the only issue, or not the only issue, but that's really a big issue. When you look at it, that booth that they had was pretty much impossible to replace. With Darrell Waltrip, and all the energy that he brought, but he knew when to use it, and when was the right time for him. To speak out and whatnot, and same for, Larry McReynolds was incredible at providing insight, and he still is, just in a different role, and that's just so hard to replicate. And there's ways they could certainly get closer, but it's just not the same, I guess, as it used to be in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. Going to our personal top 3 for Atlanta. I'm going to put Austin Cindric number 1, actually. He had the best average running position of the day at 5.03, and he led 47 laps, eventually was caught up in one of those wrecks later on in the race, but he continues to show he is one of the best guys in the series, maybe the best right now on drafting tracks, and he doesn't have much to show for it through these first two races, but he was in contention to win both of them and should have had a great chance. So I want to shout out Austin Cindric there with my number 1. And my number 2, Josh Berry, similar boat, was caught up in a wreck as well, but had an average running position of 5.5, led 56 laps, and it was a great showing for Berry and the Wood brothers. And I hope that they can keep this up throughout the year, because I do like seeing the Wood brothers up there and battling for great finishes. So shout out to Josh Berry. And then also in third, I had Michael McDowell, battled back from 6 laps down early on with car troubles to finish 13th. I think that was a record for how many laps down and coming back to the lead lap. So, just shout out to Michael McDowell, because not giving up, that team didn't give up the whole day and fixed that car. And also kind of a shout out to the new DVP rule and, allowing him to, make that change and come back out on track, because I don't know if that's something we would have seen last year. So shout out to McDowell and NASCAR for fixing that rule.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of candidates for personal top 3 this week, and I think you did a really great job with yours. And I think for me, I got one driver, same as you, but I got a couple different ones as well. I've got a Christopher Bell in mind. Obviously, he won the race. Only led one lap, but winning the race, only leading one lap is still a testament. I mean, he didn't really have a lot to work with up front. The front of the field, obviously, start of the day was dominated by Ford, and then later in the day, you had a lot of Chevys up there towards the end. There were no other Toyotas in the top 5, and Denny Hamlin was the only other one kind of near him in 6th. So for him to win this race on a drafting track, without a lot of help up there up front, I thought was pretty significant. And even though he may not have been the best driver all day long, he was there when it mattered, and fought from, he spent a lot of this race towards the back of the field. So I felt like there was a lot of fight there, and a great execution at the end. I also had Josh Berry in my top 3. Great race, like you said. Second best average run, right behind Cindric. He was pretty much the only guy close to Cindric in that this week, and he was second in laps led, I believe. To lead 56 laps in a Wood Brothers car, pretty impressive. And it's really unfortunate that he couldn't have been up there. Even not winning this race, a top 5 or top 10 would have been great for that team. And then my third guy I have is Ryan Blaney. I think, I almost just put Penske up there because all 3 of their cars ran really well all day again, even though they only had one in the top 10. Maybe I certainly get the argument for Cindric over Blaney. So, but since you were highlighting Cindric, I went ahead and threw Blaney in here just because he's had back-to-back races now where he's crashed towards the end of the race and still finished inside the top 10.
True.
I mean, I believe he's first in points even though he's crashed in both races, which is really impressive. And, finished 7th and 4th in those 2 races. Really cool. I mean, I thought, when Hocevar kind of crashed him out there, I thought that his day was done and he'd maybe finish in like the 15 to 20 range or something. So to be able to battle back all the way to 4th and be the first car right behind that trio at the end is really impressive.
Yeah, and to start that far back in the race, in the later stages of it and fight through the field, I know he was able to come in and give some new tires, but that also shows that tires are somewhat of a factor here at Atlanta, which I think is a huge for the racing, but also that Blaney didn't have a great car when he got back in traffic. He was complaining about it a lot of the day. Up front, he seemed fine, but to work through the field that quickly with a car that, might not have been so great in traffic, and also after just getting crashed in the late stage of a race for the second straight week, finishing in 4th was a great finish for him.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think there were at least 5 or 6 guys, maybe more, that you could have had up here in your top 3. I mean, I mentioned guys like Ricky Stenhouse and John Hunter Nemechek earlier, guys that were aren't normally up there fighting for wins, end up in the top 10. Really impressive. And then, depending on how you feel about Carson Hocevar's race, him finishing in 2nd is really impressive as well. But I know we're about to talk more about him.
Yeah, well, my stinker of the week, I was thinking about Hocevar, but I wanted to save that for a little bit after this because I think that there's a little bit more to unpack there than, what we saw at the end of the race and how some of the other drivers felt. But so I changed mine to NASCAR for that yellow flag incident at the end and just the inconsistency. We talked about it a lot earlier, but I just think, some consistency would go a long way here with the fans. And I think that's what NASCAR needs to focus on with these late race incidents.
Yeah, I mean, I considered Hocevar as well, but I kind of wanted to have a deeper conversation about it and, about the way he raced and, how that all ended up. So for me, I couldn't really find anybody else. I mean, I feel like, a lot of the guys that finished at the bottom of the field, just ended up kind of caught in accidents.
Yeah.
Wasn't really their fault kind of thing. So I didn't really have a lot as far as drivers for Stinker of the Week or even teams. So I just went with Fox for, a lot of the things that we talked about, missing accidents, missing pit stops, more trouble with the booth, and just not a very sound week. And one of the things I'm most fascinated for this coming week is to see how this first IndyCar booth does with Fox, and how different the broadcast is. We could get something totally different, and something that's great, or we could end up with the same issues. And I'm fascinated to see how that goes.
Yeah, I am too. So we'll get into the Hocevar thing now. Then, he was the ire of a lot of drivers after the race and during the race. Kyle Busch not happy with him. Ryan Blaney not happy with him. Him and Ross Chastain had a bit of an argument, I guess, after the race. I think that they just talked it out, but nothing physical. But I think he races in a way that is a lot different than a lot of the other drivers out there. He's a young guy. His whole career through trucks, through everything else, he has been known to be a bit more on the aggressive side, which, to be honest with you, I'm completely fine with that. I think that there is a line to an extent whenever you get in the Cup Series of guys, they just wanted to be treated a certain way and have a certain level of respect, especially with a lot of the guys that have been in the series now for 8, 9, 10 plus years. They kind of have this code with each other of how they race each other. And Hocevar is a young guy, his second year. He's not, exactly all in on that code. I think that he is one of the most talented drivers that we have out there, especially as a young guy. He showed a lot of speed in the first season last year. He's shown great speed so far this season, and especially in this race at Atlanta. I thought he was one of the best at using that draft and making those moves throughout the race. I just think that he needs to hone in that aggressiveness and use it when it matters most, and kind of dial it back when he needs to. I feel like it's a very similar conversation to what we've had with Ross Chastain the past few years of an incredibly talented driver and a guy who has all of the tools to succeed, but is just overly aggressive at some spots and can get himself into a little bit of trouble. I think if Hocevar can reel that back in, and it is a tough line to go on, because on the one hand, if you reel it in too much, you can lose your edge and what you have over the competition. But on the other hand, it might help you in the long run of not making too many enemies out there. And you need to have some help on some weeks, because if no one's going to ever give you a break, you're not going to make it long in these races, no matter how fast you are.
Yeah, I was really kind of fascinated by this dialogue about Hocevar after the race. I had to watch this race on tape delay because I was traveling, and I didn't really get much spoiled for me before the race, but I saw one or two little things about, Hocevar being too aggressive and, being over the top and, being a dangerous driver even. So, when I went into the race watching it, pretty much the whole stage 3, I kept on expecting, these big accidents to start because of Hocevar. And, I was expecting, either one massive wreck or a few smaller ones. And, as he kind of pushed his way towards the front of the field. And, I mean, really the only thing that, I saw was the Blaney incident. I mean, I think he got, a little over aggressive there, but I don't think it was, it came from a place of bad intent or anything. Yeah. I think he just, tried to push himself sort of into a hole there that didn't exist, and ended up spinning Blaney. And but I think overall, he got aggressive there towards the end of the race, but he didn't spin anyone out. He didn't, he kind of pushed Ross out of the way a little bit, but I think overall, I agree with you that I think there's nothing wrong with being a little bit aggressive, as long as you do it responsibly. And I mean, you could argue not every move he made was responsible, especially the Blaney one, but overall, I think, it was not as bad as I had sort of expected. And yeah, I think, there was I saw a lot of dialogue after I watched it, going back and looking more deeper into it. A lot of people sort of debating, we want aggressive drivers in NASCAR, as fans, because it makes it more entertaining. And, we think of the drivers, 15, 20 years ago that we all loved, when NASCAR was in its prime, and we think of a lot of aggressive drivers who are willing to do anything to win. And we always say we want more of that, but now when a guy like this comes along, a lot of fans are against him and, opposed to his way of doing things. And, I wonder sort of where he's going to fall with the fans, especially if he, continues to, find more success in the sport and starts winning races and starts being a real contender. I wonder what his image is going to end up looking like, and kind of how the cards are going to fall there.
Yeah, that's, I feel like the exact argument and defense that I've had of Ross Chastain for the past few years is that we beg in this sport for a guy who is going to be aggressive, doesn't care what other people think, and is just going to make whatever moves he has to make to win. And I feel like Hocevar is a very similar guy, and I think that that's a great thing for the sport. You don't want everybody to be that way, because I think that there's a good, thing where some guys are seen as good guys and some guys, I guess, are seen as bad guys. I think that is a great thing. So you don't want everybody to go to that side of being overly aggressive, but I think to have a few guys in the sport that are like that is a great thing. And, I see why guys could get upset with it, but also I think that's something that you just have to deal with out there. And I don't think he did anything at Atlanta that was too over the top. I know it was a bad move on Blaney. I guess he was trying to push him and just caught him in the wrong spot. And, that's just something that happens out there. Driving around like that for 260 laps, eventually someone's going to get a bad push or whatever, and that just happens. So like you said, I don't think he did anything that was too over the top. I know he does have that reputation of being an aggressive driver, and I feel like that's why these guys haven't, cut him some slack for some things, I guess, over this weekend. But, I think that I don't want him to change the way he races. It might be best for him to dial it back a little bit and, use it when he needs it the most, because like I mentioned, you're not going to get much help out there if you don't. But I have no problem if he, doesn't change the way he races, just like I felt about, Ross Chastain these past few years.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's why I almost put him for Stinker of the Week, even though I think I support a lot of, his aggressive moves, and, I support that kind of driving style. I think there's certainly something to be said of, not necessarily trying to be best friends with everyone out there, but not making too many enemies, especially as early on in his career as he is. These are guys that if he's able to stay in the sport and build a successful career, he could be racing against these guys for 10, 15 years, maybe even longer. And, you don't want to, immediately be enemies with everybody out there. You want to be able to, at least kind of keep everyone neutral and, not push the envelope too much too early. But I also get that he's a young guy going for his first win, and, he's going to do whatever it takes. So I get that. I agree with you that I think being a little more, using a little more judgment, I guess, to kind of figure out when to make those moves, I think would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is, all of these guys that have been, that complained about, Hocevar over the weekend, Kyle Busch, Ross Chastain there at the end, Ryan Blaney sometimes, at times early in their careers, they were just as aggressive, if not more. I mean, we know the reputation Kyle Busch has, Ross Chastain as well. So I think it's just something that comes with not necessarily age, but years in the Cup Series. It's just you dial that back a little bit. I mean, shoot, it took Kyle Busch a long time, I feel like, to dial that back, and now he's a guy that everyone, I feel like, is turning on it and starting to like more. So I think it's just, he's a young guy going for his first win, and he's going to drive whatever it takes to get that. I don't have any problem with that at all. And I think a lot of these guys at this point in their career would have done the same thing in the same situation.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. As long as it doesn't become over the top and dangerous, I think being aggressive is a good thing, and I think it's something that we all want to watch as fans. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of Carson's year looks like, seeing if he can get a win, and seeing kind of how his relationship with these drivers evolve and how he evolves. If he, maybe something happens, maybe an incident that causes him to kind of, taper things back a little bit, or maybe he just decides to keep going for it, keep being aggressive, and, just let the chips lie where they may. So, yeah, I'm fascinated to see where the rest of his year goes.
Yeah, I agree. Moving to just a quick fantasy update here for our NASCAR Fantasy League for the year. I lead 44-40 after the second week. You had a big week, 28 points coming back into it. So it's starting to close up a little bit. I think, obviously having Bell on your side helped with getting the win there. So I think it's going to be one of those things throughout the year that just, flows up and down, and every race is going to have some big swings in the points.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I believe I had almost the whole top 5 here, except for Stenhouse, I guess. So, yeah, big week.
Yeah. Well, we'll make some predictions for COTA NASCAR next week. The new layout at COTA will make the lap times a little bit shorter. They're kind of cutting out that whole middle portion of the lap, and I feel like hopefully the racing stays as good, because I think the racing at COTA has been a lot of fun the past few years. Obviously, Turn 1 is always a big talking point at COTA, but I've liked the racing, so I hope it stays the same with this new layout.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand the layout change, because I think the racing has been good there. And, I really enjoy this compared to, not necessarily compared to some of the other road courses, I guess, because I enjoy most of them. But, I love seeing them race here. And, this is one of those tracks that I wish every series would race at. I would hope that IndyCar would get it back on the calendar, sometime in the near future. And, yeah, I'm really excited to see what this weekend entails.
Yeah, I am too. In our picks for this week, I will say watch out for Tyler Reddick. 3 wins on the road courses in his last 15 races on that track layout. Also, Connor Zilic making his Cup Series debut, I think is one to watch out for. Certainly, we know how good he is on road courses as well, but I think my pick is going to be SVG. I just think he's going to get it started early with these road courses, secure his spot in the playoffs, and then he can really go at it the rest of the year on ovals and road courses as well, and just build more consistency as he gets more time in the Cup Series. So I think SVG is going to get the job done this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think SVG is a great pick. We both thought that he would win a road course at some point this year, and lock in his place in the playoff that way. So for me, I went ahead and went with Alex Bowman. He's got the best average finish of anyone at COTA without a win. A top 5 in all 3 races they've ran here going back to 2022. So I'm going to go with him to finally get the job done here. Obviously, he won on Chicago Street Course last year, so pretty decent road course driver. And I'm going to say he wins this one. But I also want to say, watch out for Ty Gibbs. I think could have a really good week this week. Has a top 5 already at COTA and has had some road course success as well. And Chase Elliott also, I think, could be a threat this week. Another guy with a top 5 at COTA, and has run really well on a lot of road courses. So I think there's a lot of guys this week, with a chance to win. Obviously the guys on the big teams, and some guys a little further down the lineup as well, I think have a really good shot. And it's fun to see another track like COTA, I think, can be a little bit of an equalizer for some of these guys.
Yeah, I like I said earlier, I just really hope the racing stays as good as it has been, because I feel like we've gotten some pretty good finishes out of COTA and some great races so far. So I hope the layout change doesn't make it kind of an obsolete road course. But we'll move on here to last week. They had the F175 livery reveal show that F1 put on, and I just want to go through quickly, and we'll just rank all of the liveries from the 2025 season. Starting with Stake here, I gave Stake a C-, and I don't think it's a terrible livery. I think a lot of people don't like it. I like the green and black combo. I think that those two colors together makes for a great, color combination, and really stands out compared to a lot of the other colors that we see on the F1 grid. But I just think that their Vegas livery last year was so good. The lightning kind of scheme. I just loved it. Or flames. I'm sorry. It was a flame scheme. I just loved it. And I thought that, anything that they could have done this year that wasn't that would have been kind of a downgrade. So I wish that they would have went with that full time this year, but I don't hate this scheme. It's very simple. It could be a lot better with their colors, but also I don't think it's, the ugliest thing that I've seen.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go with a B- here. I'm not usually a big fan of sort of the not necessarily bright colors, but it's sort of like a neon green almost that they've been using since they've been a Stake team. But I really like this car. I really like the way that the green and black kind of fade into each other further back on the car. I do agree that their Vegas one last year was the best one that they've had, and would have loved to have seen that make a comeback full time. But just wasn't really expecting that, as they kind of marketed it as a one-time thing. So I'm pretty happy with this one. I think I don't know if they could have graded much higher, honestly, with those colors. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of, but I really do like this design. Given what they have to work with.
Yeah. Moving on to Williams, I gave Williams a C. I think it's a perfectly fine livery. Nothing spectacular. I like the light blue better for Williams than I do the dark blue. Obviously, some of their old schemes with the dark blue and the yellow I think look great. But in their in this newer era, I think the light blue kind of suits them better, and it's the color that they have on their logo. So I wish that they would go into that a little bit more, but I like that it does fade from that dark blue to light blue. I think it looks pretty solid. But I just think it's a fine livery. There's nothing spectacular about it, so give it middle of the road C.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I was feeling about a C or a C+. I think it's nice. I think it's, it's a little bit basic, but I do like, that they went with some different shades, that they didn't just do one shade of blue all the way through. I would have liked to seen a little more of a lighter blue on some of the car like they've done in the past. But yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at on this one. Is it's not terrible, certainly. I like the car, but it's nothing special, I guess.
Yeah, I know that some of these old Williams ones were based on sponsors that they had, but the Martini ones that they used to have were great. The Golf one that they ran a couple years ago at Monaco was great. So I wish that they could kind of lean into their sponsors a little bit more and make something like that, but I think that this is a perfectly fine livery. Next up is Racing Bulls, and I gave them an A. I love this livery. I think the smaller bulls on the back, fading into the blue is a great touch. I think the white juxtaposed to the red, yellow, and blue, I think looks spectacular. I've always liked the lighter blue with the Red Bull kind of logo involved, whether that's with Toro Rosso or V-Carb or now Racing Bulls or just the main Red Bull team. I've always liked the lighter blue with that red and yellow, and I think that this plays it perfectly and kind of takes it back a little bit to that scheme that Red Bull ran a few seasons ago at Turkey, which is one that I think a lot of people loved, and I love this one, and I think the blue is a nice touch as well, which they didn't have on that Turkey scheme.
Yeah, I'm with you again on this one. This is, an A, maybe even an A+ for me. I think this is about as good as you're going to get. I think that they actually did really well last year as well, for all the talk about, a V-Carb and how complicated of a name it was, and, just a lot going on with that team. But I did like their livery for last year, but this one I think is even much better than that one. We talk a lot about the white Red Bull car sort of being one of our favorite liveries in recent history, and I think they really knocked it out of the park here. Obviously, Racing Bulls instead of Red Bull, but going back to the white, and not just pure white either, mixing it in with the blue, like you said, with the red and yellow on the Red Bull logo. I just think this is pretty much as good as it got this year, and really fantastic car, and one, honestly, I might get a die cast of or something because it's really nice.
Yeah, for me, this is the best car of the year, and one that I might look at getting a diecast for as well. As moving on to Haas, I thought I gave them a B-. I thought it was a fine livery. I like red, black, and white are great colors no matter what you do with them. So it's hard to kind of mess up that as a livery. So no matter what, I think Haas is probably looking at a C at the lowest, depending on what they do. But I like that, I like the white on the side pods. I think it looks good. The only thing I wish they would have made the Haas logo on the side red. I think it could have popped a little bit more and had a little bit more of a glow to it. And I wish that the nose cone was all one color. But other than that, I think it's a fine livery, and the color scheme looks pretty good.
Yeah, I'm pretty close with you here. I put about C+ on this one. I mean, like you said, it's tough to go that wrong with Haas, just with the colors. I personally always love red and black on a jersey or on a livery or anything like that. And the white in there is a nice touch as well. Like you said, I do like the white on the side, and think it looks really good for the most part. But it doesn't really blow me away. It looks pretty similar, even though there are some differences. It looks and feels kind of similar to a lot of Haas cars in the past. And like you said, there's not a lot of red in there for Haas either. Which is fine every now and then, maybe for like one-off schemes or something like that. But for a whole season car, I'd like to see a little bit more red in there, at least on the sides.
Yeah. For Alpine, this is one that I think a lot of people really liked. To me, I didn't like it quite as much. I gave it a C-. I'm not really a fan of the outline on the BWT on the side. I just think that looks, not as clean as it could. And then the slash of pink on the back as well with the Alpine logo in it, where it's kind of just part of the Alpine logo. It cuts some of it out as it goes from pink to blue. I think that just feels a little bit out of place as well. And, another hot take, I kind of liked Alpine's car last year. I know it was a lot of black, but I actually kind of like the exposed carbon fiber in some aspects. I thought they did it really well last year. And then with the hints and highlights of pink and blue, I think it looked really good juxtaposed to the black. So I'm actually a bigger fan of last year's Alpine than this one. I think this one's fine, but and it might be one that grows on me throughout the year, but I wasn't a huge fan of this one.
Yeah, this is the one that I was most torn on out of all of them, honestly, by far, because, at first I really didn't like it. The first look I got of it just was not a fan at all. But I agree with you. I mean, I really think the only thing that, for me personally, kind of made me feel that way at the start was, like you said, the lettering on the side. I think if it was, I know we just talked about Haas's being white, and in that case we thought it might have been a mistake, but in this case I feel like if they had gone with white lettering for the BWT on the side and whatnot, I think it would have been perfect. I think it would have popped a lot better. And yeah, this one's definitely grown on me since I first saw it. So I'm not totally out on it, but so I'm kind of feeling like a middling grade on this, maybe in the C range, but I feel like, when I first saw it, it was a D, and now by the end of the year, it could be a B or a B+ for me, just depending on if it continues to grow on me or not. But yeah, this is one I was really torn on, and I feel like was, so close to being really a great livery that is kind of disappointing that it's, just on the edge for me, but not quite there.
Yeah, I feel a very similar way about this Alpine one. I'm not really sure how to feel about it. Initial reaction so far is, it's not my favorite, but I do see it being one that could grow on me throughout the year. So next up, Aston Martin. I gave them a D. I just feel like they could do a lot more with their livery than they do every season. I feel like it's a pretty similar looking one with that dark green, which I think is a great color for a race car. But I think that if they added, a few more hints of that light lime kind of green throughout the car, I think it could look really, really good. So I feel like I'm disappointed that they haven't gone in that direction yet. And I think the black on the side pod also is a little bit off around the Aramco logo there. So, yeah, I think that they could do a lot more, and that's partially why I'm giving them such a low grade, is because I just think there's a lot more untapped potential there.
Yeah, this is one of the more disappointing ones for me. I think, I've really loved their cars the last couple of years. It's been one of my favorite cars on the grid, bar none, these last couple of years. And this one's just a little bit disappointing to me. Like you said, going with sort of the black carbon fiber look on the side pods just doesn't really hit the same. I liked it more, when it was pretty much all green. And it's just, it's not awful. It's not going to go in like the all-time bad liveries or anything, but yeah, it's just disappointing. I thought, I would have liked to see them change a little bit, I guess, just to switch it up. But even if they've rolled out basically the same livery as last year, I think I would have been much happier with it. Yeah, I'm just a little bit disappointed in this one.
Yeah. Next up is Mercedes. I gave them a B. I actually like the fact that they added a bit more silver on the side and kind of a gradient from silver to black on the back half. And then you also have the Mercedes logos on the back that start small and get bigger. I think that's, always been a good look on the Mercedes. And I think the silver to the gradient black kind of helps feed into that as well. And then I think it looks really solid with the strip of teal on the side. I've always loved that on the Mercedes cars. I think it's a great look. So yeah, I think it's a really solid livery, similar to last year, a little bit different, but I'm gonna give it a B.
Yeah, I think I'm more in the C plus range for this one. I do like it. Just for me personally, I've always liked when they've gone with the black more than the silver. I know that their whole branding is the silver arrows, so that kind of makes it tough. But the couple of years they've gone with the all black cars, the all black with a little bit of teal, I've really loved that. I do think they balance the colors well on this one. You get some silver, you get a little bit of black, and you get the teal.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do a great job there. So I don't think it's bad, certainly. I think it's, a solid livery. I just don't have it up there with my all-time favorite Mercedes ones.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the black is going to be, all-time Mercedes livery. I think that's always going to be what it's compared to. So next up, Red Bull. I gave Red Bull a C. It's the same car we've seen for the past decade or so not much to say about it other than, it looks the same. I will say that in some aspects, I like the fact that they keep the livery a bit the same because it gives them an identity, and you can always tell that's a Red Bull coming by on track. I think that's a great thing and something that is missed a little bit in racing, changing, your paint schemes every week or changing your liveries every year or whatever. I think that a consistent branding is, a good thing in some aspects, but I do think after a decade or so of having the same one, it might be time to switch it up a little bit and try something different. So, yeah, I'm kind of just, it's the Red Bull livery.
Yeah, I'm exactly with you on this one because I also have a C just because it's the same. But, I do agree with you that I think there's value in that. I think we see a lot of the smaller or less established teams especially, do some radical changes from year to year. And, it's a little bit tough to maintain your branding and build a brand when you're constantly changing your colors or your schemes or whatnot. And I think that, if Red Bull, it seems Red Bull is intent on staying in F1 indefinitely and being one of the premier F1 brands as they have been for the last couple decades. And I think if you're looking to do that, having a consistent scheme, like we see in other sports where the top teams have their jerseys and they're the same every year, the Lakers or, the Red Sox and Yankees in baseball, whatnot, like, they run out basically the same jerseys every year and what you're going to get with them. I think that's a good idea on the whole. I do think, if there's a time for them to change, I think maybe next year would be a good time to try something different, going into a new car in 2026. Obviously, I know that engineers don't really affect the design, but, you're going into the post-Newey era and, changing things up a little bit at the team. I think, if they're ever going to change it, I think next year would be a good time to, but I really don't have a problem if every team did the same thing every year. It might get a little monotonous, but I think for a team that wants to establish itself as one of the premier brands in the sport and kind of already has, I think that, I don't really have a problem with them keeping it pretty similar.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Next one up is Ferrari, and I gave Ferrari a D, sadly. I love the darker red that they went with this year. I think it, just feels more Ferrari, but that white strip on the back, I can't look past it. It really it kind of ruins the car for me. And I know HP is, their main sponsor and they have that blue in their logo, but so I know they have to have it, but I feel like it also kind of messes up the flow of the car a little bit. Last year they were able to do it to where it made a little bit more sense, but I think the white strip with the blue HP logo in the middle of it just really throws the whole car off for me. And I think they could have had a great livery with that darker red, but that white strip, I just can't get past it.
Yeah, those were the two things I noticed as well. One with the white strip, I'm not really a fan of. But I think the bigger issue for me is there's just HP logos plastered all over this car. Yeah. And I know that a lot of people have not taken well to the HP sponsorship at Ferrari. And I get that, it's Ferrari. It's a, one of a kind team in F1, one of a kind brand. And, we don't want to see HP up there, in the team name or constantly plastered everywhere. And honestly, up until this point, I haven't had as much of an issue with it. They're a sponsor, they're the lead sponsor, they're going to be involved. But man, they've just gone over the top with this one. This car just is not. It's just all over the place. It feels like an HP team. Almost as much as a Ferrari team at this point. And that's really disappointing to see, especially with Leclerc and Hamilton being the driver duo. I think there was some real expectations of delivering one of the best liveries on the grid, and I have no problem with them continuing with the red. It's Ferrari. But yeah, this one definitely underwhelmed, and I'd say this and Aston Martin were probably my two most underwhelming for this year.
Yeah, and you have the white on the front wing as well, the white on the rear wing. It with the HP logos in there. I just think the HP blue mixed in just straight from the red, I think looks a lot better than adding the white and trying to put it in that way. So I think the white is what just really throws this car off to me. And you add all those HP logos in there, and it just looks really off-put from that beautiful red that we see.
Yeah, and I don't mind maybe a bit like they've got a big Shell logo on the front wing. I wouldn't mind one big HP logo there, and maybe even a couple on the rear wing or something. But I think I saw someone say there's like 13 or 14 HP logos on this car, and that's just overboard for me.
Yeah, I agree. Well, last up here is McLaren. I gave McLaren a B. It's pretty much the same livery as they had last year, and I liked it this year. And so just as we talked about Red Bull having the same car, this is the second year that they've had a very similar looking car, and I'm fine with that as long as it doesn't last too long or not too many teams do it. But I think I liked last year's car, so that's why I'm giving it a B again this year. And I will say I like that they changed the number font. I know it's a small thing, but last year it was so hard to read whose car was whose, and a little bit of a thinner number font this year is going to make it a lot easier. So I'll give McLaren props for that, but the rest of the car looks the same, and I'm fine with it because I liked last year's design.
Yeah, the number font was the first thing that jumped out at me just as something different, and a slight change to their branding that I really liked personally. And yeah, it's kind of in the same boat. Like you said, same thing as last year. I'd maybe have it in the B- C+ range. I like this car. It doesn't really knock me out of the park or anything, but I do like the numbering, and I don't feel like they went nearly as over the top with some of the sponsors. You've got a good variety in there. And yeah, just like we said with red and black, I think that, technically papaya and black, but like an orange and black kind of thing, I think that can work really well as well. And yeah, so I mean, generally, I like this car. It's not my top couple, but it's certainly not in the bottom couple either.
Yeah, this isn't anything new. This is something that they've had for a few years, but since we're talking about liveries, I feel like I can rant about it a little bit. The Google Chrome wheel covers, I wish that they would get rid of them so badly. It just offsets everything, all having like 4 different colors on the wheels and then having that juxtaposed against the orange, which is a different color. I've just never liked that Google Chrome wheel covers, and I'm waiting for the day that they get rid of it and lose that Chrome partnership, because I feel like the car would just look so much better with just normal black or even orange wheel covers.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I actually wouldn't mind that at all if the car was colored differently. I actually, would probably kind of like it just to, add a little bit of color there. But yeah, like you said, none of the colors that are in the Google wheel are the same as what's on the car, so it just doesn't go together at all. Maybe if the car was like a red or a yellow or something that's on that wheel, maybe it would look a little bit different. But yeah, it's just not. I don't have a problem with it in a vacuum, but on this car specifically, it doesn't look great.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's everything for the F1 car livery reveals for the 2025 season. Upcoming this week is the beginning of the IndyCar season, and we will have a separate preview show for that coming out later this week, probably on Thursday. So yeah, stay tuned for that. We'll break down everything from, rookie of the year to our top 10 in the standings, and have a few more, fun things in there as well. So stay tuned for that. On probably Thursday, we'll put that one out.
Yeah, it's going to be great, and I'm really looking forward to this IndyCar season. We're so close, right around the corner, and I think this is going to be one of the best ones yet.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that wraps up everything for this week. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.
Yeah, see you soon.